Welcome to Amazing Books. I am Michael Gardner, and with me is the lovely evangelist Naomi Stokes. And Naomi, would you like to introduce our amazing author today?
Of course. Hi, everyone. We have today our amazing author, a bestseller for 2011 from Today, USA, correct?
Yes,
USA Today.
I'm sorry, USA Today, the best-selling, and 2011. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Janet Tronstad. It is an honor to have you here. It is an honor for me to be here with you, to interview you, and I'm sure my handsome host as well thinks so
Yes,
as well.
I am delighted to be here with both of you.
Thank you.
Let's get in with some questions. Ms. Tronstad, can you tell us who is Janet Tronstad?
Who is Janet Tronstad? That's a good question.
Ah.
You may be interested in my background. I grew up on a small farm in Montana. Lived there for the first 18 years of my life. And the community, I think, helped form me. It's a small community near Fort Shaw, Montana, which is one of the old forts in the 1800s. And I was telling Naomi before we started that, I have a strong history in Old West Montana because not only did I grow up in a community where we had school in the old fort and we could go out and collect arrowheads on recess,
Okay.
It was a very
Interesting.
vivid kind of experience with the Old West. I used to love Zane Grey novels. I had a real feel for what homesteading was like in those early days in Montana.
Okay. I would like to get away. I mean, it just gives me a fresh feeling where the mountain air. I can only imagine how you began writing in such a place. So what inspired you to write?
Actually, I have always loved books. I have always loved stories. And I think the combination led me to read, and that just naturally fed into a love of fiction stories. I'm a firm believer that reading fiction enhances a person's life dramatically. You experience different lives that you can't possibly go out and live.
Naomi?
Yeah, Janet, I have to ask you this question, okay?
Okay.
I was reading, and I want to ask you this. I was reading your mail order,
The
the
historical.
holiday, historical holiday mail order bride, and what I was reading, what came to my mind is that what really inspired you to write the story. I mean, it is so vivid, it is so real.
Yes, and you know what really inspired me was I had read a few books, nonfiction books about mail order brides, and I thought, what kinds of things would make a woman so desperate
Okay.
that she is willing to go and marry somebody who she's maybe had a couple of letters from? I liken it to today, if somebody asked you to go on a blind date with their nephew or whatever. Okay, that's a little scary. But imagine if you had to do that and marry them that night. I mean,
Right.
it's like, it's a stranger. They could be telling you the truth in the letters and maybe not. It's a dramatic thing. And that whole phenomenon of the mail order brides came about because after the Civil War, all the men on the East Coast were gone. They died in the war, whatever. And, a lot of women didn't have husbands. And in those days, you didn't have an economic future if you didn't have a husband. You could maybe, a lot of my heroines, I have them either working in a large house as a servant. They could be maybe working in a factory. They could be doing farm labor work there. But, there weren't very many opportunities for a woman to make a living. And so, really, if you wanted to have any kind of security, you needed to get married. And the men in the West didn't have wives. So it was kind of a a meeting of the
That's
two desperate
That's something new.
groups.
I mean, it's history that I didn't know, and which is why it's great to have you here.
Yes.
And can you expound a little more on that? You're saying the women didn't have husbands. So okay, we talk about mail order bride.
Right, mail order brides.
So what would happen next after you said the men in the West didn't have wives, which is just a shock to me. And so what happens next for these women on the East Coast who don't have men because of the war?
Well, they face a hard life. I mean, if they don't marry somebody, you know, they have limited resources in terms of employment usually. Some of them maybe, you know, are taking, one of my mail order brides, you know, the woman, I have her having lived with her brother and his family for a while, but when they weren't economically able to afford that, you know, then she went west.
I'm sure you have male readers, and so my interest was, okay, so how do they order these? So do you say the men order the brides from, where do they come from?
They put an ad, and they had these bridal catalogs, not a catalog like Sears and Roebuck. I mean, they were like printed sheets, and they were just all these ads from men saying, you know, I'd like a woman who can cook, who can take care of a family, who can whatever. And then they would go to areas back east, and the women would respond, or vice versa. The women in the east might have put an ad in one of these things, and the men in the west would respond. So it's based on an ad.
Sounds fun. Tell us more, bring us more into the story without giving us too much. Bring us more into the story because it sounds interesting, and I'm sure when I leave the studio, I'm going to go online and see if this phenomenon still goes on.
Yeah, you can order our mail order. Mistletoe Bride comes out December this year. And in my novella, it's basically two novellas. One is written by my good friend Jillian Hart, and I write the other one, Janet Tronstad. And in my novella, I have the woman is recently widowed, and she becomes a mail order bride and brings her daughter west to meet this gentleman. And the beginning part, she's very nervous because she has just discovered after she got the plane or the ticket for the train, she began to suspect she was pregnant because she's, you know, fairly recently widowed. And by the time she gets to Montana, she knows that she's expecting a baby. And so she hasn't obviously told the man that, you know, if he marries her, she's going to have a baby shortly thereafter. And she doesn't know how he'll feel about that. So that's the setup. And it's a legitimate setup. I mean, they don't know each other very well, as is the case with all of those mail order brides and their grooms. They didn't know each other well. So you don't know if it's a kind person, if it's a person who made up a bunch of stuff and put in the letters, or somebody else wrote the letters for him. You know, you don't know.
So that's amazing.
Yeah, it is. It's a very powerful point in American history. And I don't think we often think about what is a person willing to risk to find a family and love.
Oh, so we can find that in your book. It sounds like a great book. Naomi, what can you expound more on with different questions? I mean, this book is very interesting to me. In a day and age where the children and adults are using Facebooks and Instagram to meet people, here we have a great book that we can sink ourselves into, go into a land or a journey.
Yes.
Of mail order brides talking about today's relationships.
Yes.
And I would love to surround myself and just dive into that book. And I can't wait to read it.
They are powerful stories because of the situations. And, you know, it's just, I love writing these mail order bride stories because you can just feel what a woman would feel in that situation. I mean, I think every woman hopes to marry and have love and happiness in a congenial family situation. But in that situation, you didn't know what you were you had to really step out on faith. And these were all women of faith. You know, they prayed about their decisions. You know, they agonized over them. But in the end, they didn't they didn't have a guarantee when they went forth. And I will say that's something, I have a whole series of Dry Creek contemporary books.
Okay.
And one of the things I really try to weave into my stories is sort of the contrast in life. Almost everybody has to reach for something, you know. They have to take a step of faith
Okay.
to find what they desire. It usually doesn't just come to you. It's like you have to either learn to trust somebody, you need to give up some of your issues, you know, you have to compromise in some way. That is the road to marital, you know, bliss.
It
I
gives
guess.
gives everyone hope.
Yeah.
Naomi.
Yeah, you know, I just want to just expound on this just a little bit, and then I want to ask you another question. In reading this book, The Mail Order, put it up, Holiday, Holiday Brides. When I was reading the book, what really, you know, really got my interest was the two women that I was reading about. Both of them came on the train, you know, with little or nothing.
Yes.
And I said to myself, okay, mail-ordered bride, then why these women, or did the men choose the women, or did they know that these women had little or no money? Or
I'm sure they did know that they had little money, because the custom kind of was that, you know, the woman would come, but the man would send her money for the train ticket.
Exactly. Okay.
And so that was a step of trust on his part, because, you know, the person on the other end could have just spent it on something else, you know.
Exactly.
You know, but it was, you know.
But I encourage the audience to get this
the
book
men
and read
didn't
it.
necessarily have very much either.
Well, yeah, I
you know.
noticed that when reading the book, but this is a very good book, and I would encourage the audience to get this book
Yeah.
and read it.
Yes.
Now, let's go back into history a little bit. Your very first book,
Yes.
your very first book, and that's what started the Dry Creek
series. Yes.
Your very first book was An Angel for Dry Creek.
Yes. And
Tell
this
us a
is a
little about
good
that.
example of what I was trying to say, in that I like to have a lot of texture in my books, sort of the conflict between sort of an idyllic relationship or place and the hardship, because, you know, a lot of people have hardship in life. They don't just
Exactly.
have this wonderful idyllic thing. So in this book, An Angel for Dry Creek, it starts out with two small boys, four-year-old twins, two little twins, who had lost their mother many years,
sad.
well, you know, in their short life, and they didn't remember their mother. And the father, and where they lived prior to where they live now, there had been a fire, and they had lost all of their pictures of their mother. And so these two boys desperately wanted to meet an angel, because they thought an angel could tell them what their mother looked like. And so one night, there's a police sketch artist, a woman named Glory, and she stops at the parsonage to ask for directions to someplace. And these boys see her. She's dressed in white, and she's got her high beams facing towards her, so it looks like she's got a halo. And they think she is the angel who has come to tell them
I could just imagine
what their
the
mother
scene.
looked
Yeah.
like. And of course, the father, he has given up any hope of God, because how could God take his wife away from him and the mother away from his sons? He just doesn't even want to hear about it. So anyways, she is there, and the boys just make an immediate attraction to her. They feel that she has the key. And, you know, after a day passes, she realizes she does have the key, because she's a sketch artist. And if if the father will tell her what the mother looked like, she can make a drawing for the boys, and they can have their picture of their mother.
That is beautiful.
It is, and it shows the pain of living, because the father doesn't want to talk about it. He doesn't want to remember what his wife looked like. It's too painful. And so he has to work with this woman to get the picture for his sons.
And this is set around Christmas.
It's around Christmas.
That's a beautiful story, a beautiful time, a time where we all can remember.
Exactly.
Yes.
I'm sure the audience can remember, you know, the presents, the getting up, the going to sleep, but the priceless stories in life is what you have here.
Yes.
And this great work, an angel for Dry Creek.
Yes, and
That's
you
a
can
priceless story.
get that on Amazon as an ebook, and possibly as a used book on Amazon.
what made me cry?
I've got
Tear-jerking.
23, 24 of these contemporary stories, and they all have something like that, where a person has to strive beyond what they think they can do